Here? Everyone?
Up in where?
You were showing me coming off the causeway there. You asked me
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Hair was flowing out of there.
I'm Mark. I don't know. Is your big mission? We're going to see you today. I'm Mark. Oh, damn. I know you did good. No, you did good.
All right, let's get started with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Coming through from Banana Creek.
And Jackie, a roll call?
Morning, yes. All right, Don Dice,
Here.
Mark Schroep,
Here.
Richard Nipper is not here, Bruce Larson is not here, and Kimberly is not here yet. Deborah Harmon? Here. Laura Lee Thompson?
Here.
Nick Sanzone will not be here today. Richard Bankhead? Here. Aaron Adams will not be here today. Kurt Smith? Here. Fred Goldstein?
Here.
Barbara Wall-Scanlon? Here. Eric Manes?
Here.
John Windsor?
Here.
Charlie Venuto?
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum.
Approval of the agenda. Do I have somebody?
I move to approve the agenda from the last meeting.
Thank you, Laura Lee. Thank you, Barbara. Approval of minutes from last month. Oh, let's vote. I'm sorry. Hey, I'm new at this, so give me a chance. All right, let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No, passes. All right, minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
All right. That was Deb. Second? Second. That was Dick. We will vote this time. All in favor?
Aye.
You were just trying to see if somebody was paying attention. It wasn't your fault.
Yeah. Anybody opposed? Thank you very much. All right, progress reports. We got Virginia up first.
Good morning. I'm going to be very quick because this is one of your quarterly update meetings, so you get a lot more details from Aaliyah in just a few moments. On the monthly progress report, I've added a line at the top, right under the May 2025 progress report, that is sort of a running total of completed projects. So we're at 103 of the larger community projects, but I wanted to highlight we just surpassed our 2,000th homeowner project. So that's exciting news for us this month. Other things that won't come up in the quarterly for oyster monitoring by UCF. They went out to the Turkey Creek offshore site 6 months after installation, and the average density of oysters is now 1,400 oysters per square meter, live oysters per square meter, which is 14 times our target density, and 40% of those are reproductive size already. So that's super exciting. We've been super busy with number crunching this month. We have the budget changes have been approved to reflect everything that was adopted in the 2025 plan update, and we have prepared our fiscal year 2026 budget and submitted that. So that's it for page 1. And then on page 2, I just wanted to point out the long list of presentations, 10 presentations this month, and not listed on here, but just announced this week, the next tire amnesty opportunity is next week, May 19th to May 23rd, 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. At either mosquito control location. People can drop off tires in Titusville or Valcaria. And that's my report.
One quick question, if I could. On the, when I was looking through the report for the Central Florida oyster monitoring, and they listed multiple means, I assume they're doing, how many different areas did they measure, do you know, or what the overall mean was for the project? Where it said 4 to 100 millimeters?
Yeah, that was the range of size.
Right, but it said the mean shell height, so I was figuring a mean should be,
Oh. It says mean, and then it gives a range.
you can get it
4
later.
to 100.
Was that just a typo in there or something?
I think mean probably should not be in there.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Good morning. We have received $4.6 million for the February collections. And the total revenue from conception is $452 million. For the monthly financial statement, of the anticipated $514 million in revenue by the end of the fiscal year, the actuals received so far are $416 million. For the expenditures, the fiscal year total assigned to projects and programs is $85 million, and actual spent is $9.2 million. And for the quarterly financial table, which everyone received. Let's go up there. Okay. And then we're going to keep scrolling down till we get to the grant financial tables.
Can you explain the green? Can you explain the green?
For those of you, and just in case if you're wondering, Virginia just pointed out to me, the green means that we are completed.
Right, and the gray means that the project hadn't been added to the plan yet, so that's why we didn't fill in zeros, because it wasn't a project.
Yes. Okay.
back then.
Keep going down, page down. Okay. And now we're into our, well, we're still into our financial tables. And now we're going into, we're still there. This is our grant financial tables for the quarterlies. To let you know again, the years, we had to combine 17 through 20 because it's getting too long on the table. So we're actually broken those, adding those up to summary. Okay, is there any questions or anything? Okay, oh, yes, sir.
I had one. So between April and May's monthly financial statement, the year-to-date assigned for comp and benefits dropped?
It did.
So is that a job you're not filling, or what is that?
It was a reclassification of a position. It went from an ES2 to an AES. And then also we had an employee that had a career ladder adjustment, so that's why that dropped down.
Okay, and then one was really small, the Sorrel Projects funds under operating expenses dropped like $700.
That was due probably because of the plan update, we're updating.
Oh, for the updated plan,
Yes.
okay, thanks.
Okay, anything else? All right, thank you.
Thanks. Then Aaliyah's up.
All right, good morning. I'm going to be giving you guys the quarterly progress update for the reporting period between January and March. And this is all based on the 2025 plan update. And in your progress table, all your highlights in yellow are showing progress since the previous quarter. Red signifies that no progress was made, and green means that it is completed. For public education, we have 7 projects in the plan, 1 is complete, and 6 are underway. The budget for this category is $4 million, and it's estimated to reduce 33,000 pounds of nitrogen. The fertilizer and septic maintenance campaigns are 93% and 90% complete. And the Restore Our Shores project is 60% complete. This project focuses on outreach, oyster gardening, clam restoration, and their seagrass nursery. This quarter, the Restore Our Shores team conducted 66 site visits to newly trained oyster gardeners, monitored some of their oyster bars, and maintained their seagrass nursery. And this photo is showing male flowers of Haliduli wrightii in their nursery, which is a pretty big deal. For wastewater treatment facility upgrades, we have 9 projects in the plan. 4 are complete: Cocoa Beach, Rockledge, Titusville, and Palm Bay. The Rockledge facility completed construction in late December, and that was our 100th project completed. In this category, we have 3 projects in the design phase. Melbourne's Grant Street Wharf has been undergoing value engineering with plans to rebid in June. The West Melbourne Ray Bullard facility is also undergoing value engineering with plans to rebid in June or July. And the South Brevard County Wharf is in the preliminary design phase and began surveying and environmental assessments of the land. For our rapid infiltration basin and spray field upgrades, there are 2 projects in the plan. Long Point was one of our first projects that was completed, and the Sterling House condo project is not yet contracted. For package plant connections, there are 3 projects in the plan, and Oak Point is completed. The Willow Lakes RV Park is conducting additional survey and plan revisions. The county received additional grant funds for the Cove to connect to sewer, and they held an HOA meeting to discuss their options to move forward. The plan has 6 sewer lateral projects. 5 smoke testing projects are completed. The county-wide repairs are underway with a total of 1,115 out of 1,150 completed. For septic removal, we have 44 projects in the plan with 4 completed and 14 in construction. The City of Melbourne has 6 projects underway and are drafting an amendment for Sorrel staff to assist them with the connection process for their homeowners. The City of West Melbourne started construction on Lake Ashley and Dundee Circle, and on February 28th, the city was notified that the contractor had initiated the process of winding down its business operations, and since then has been informed that the company is permanently closed. So the City of West Melbourne is actively working with the surety company. A site meeting was held to assess the current status of the project and identify the remaining work to be completed. This project will move forward. There will be a temporary pause in construction activities, though. South Central C is approximately 99% complete, with 149 of 152 connections completed. The Miko project is 96% complete, and Sykes Creek Zone M, N, and T broke ground this quarter. We have 5 septic to sewer projects in the bidding phase and 10 in the design phase and are making progress. There are 8 projects in the plan that are not yet contracted. The 4 park projects, while not contracted, are moving forward. They're just waiting on some of the projects in the design phase to move forward. For septic upgrades and quick connects, so we have a total of 1,469 septic upgrades in the plan and 876 quick connects. This quarter, we had 111 septic upgrade applications submitted, and 65 of those contracts were completed, so we have a total of 418 septic upgrades completed. For the quick connects, we had 16 new applications this quarter. 72 of those contracts were completed for a total of 484 quick connects completed. We also adjusted the TN reduction based on the latest models for these projects. Stormwater has 248 projects in the plan, of which 47 have been completed. This quarter, the City of Cocoa Beach McNabb Outfall Bioretention Project was completed, and the project created 2 areas to store water to allow for infiltration and treatment. So you can see that in the photo, the holding the water, and then but in the back, the weir is will allow heavy rainfall overflow if needed. Flounder Creek has substantial construction complete. This project is adding aeration and BAM to further reduce nitrogen loading. The skimmer will allow water to flow through the BAM material before being discharged to the ditch that leads to the lagoon, and this photo is showing the plantings on top of the BAM. West Arlington also has substantial construction complete. This is a dry retention pond with BAM lining on the bottom and sides. And you can see in the photo there, the white material is the BAM. Stormwater will infiltrate through the BAM material to groundwater and reducing flow through the outfall structure into the existing ditch. St. John's River Water Management District's Crane Creek M1 Canal Flow Restoration Project is under construction and is at 90% complete. This project is rediverting flow to St. John's River. Titusville is 40% complete with the Commons and City Hall tree boxes, which we saw the video for last month. Basin 960 denitrification and Basin 958 vegetation harvesting are in the same area and have recently broke ground. They should be substantially completed in August. This project will clean the vegetative debris from this ditch and then install a sweeping device to prevent further debris buildup. The Apollo GA baffle box contract was awarded, and this is going to be the largest baffle box installed. Basin 1280B Flamingo bids came in higher than expected and are trying to determine if the project can be done within the budget. And we have 10 other projects in the design phase. For vegetation harvesting, there are 10 vegetation harvesting projects in the plan and 8 are complete. These are a one-time nutrient removal project. Basin 958 construction started, as previously mentioned, and work is underway at Kelly Park for the unincorporated countywide vegetation harvesting 2 project. There are 21 muck removal projects and 16 interstitial treatment projects in the plan. We have 3 muck projects completed and 2 interstitial treatment projects complete. Whereas dredging has reoccurring annual flux reductions, the interstitial treatment is a one-time nutrient removing project. We have 2 that are in the construction phase. Currently, the unincorporated Grand Canal project is about 88% complete and has removed approximately 453,000 cubic yards of muck. And the dredging resumed for that project in March. The Sykes Creek project has dredged 46,500 cubic yards of muck, and we're waiting to complete the O'Galley bid before proceeding with this phase 2 bid. The rebid for the O'Galley muck project closed on February 4th with contract negotiations underway. We have 11 muck projects in the design phase and 4 uncontracted muck and interstitial treatment projects in the plan.
Question. The Sykes Creek, where in there are they setting up?
So the Sykes Creek Phase 1 project is complete, and that went to the island north of Kiwanis Park.
Okay.
Sykes Creek Phase 2 has not been bid yet. We've purchased a parcel to use as a dredge material management area, and we've been working on getting that ready for use and have bid documents ready for bidding out the whole Phase 2 project. However, we were trying to get through the O'Galley bid and negotiations and award so that we would know if there were any changes that we would like to make that project more competitive, to get a better price. So we've been holding off going to bid on Sykes Creek while we negotiate the O'Galley project.
It's been a long time since high school duck hunting. Can you get to the second island by road, or is it actually an
The
island?
second site is not an island. It's on the mainland behind Walmart,
Okay,
north of Walmart.
okay. Thank you very much.
Just for that second site, is that because they can't use the island from the first
The
one?
island is full.
It's full? Got it.
Back to vegetation harvesting. So that's a one-time thing. Are different municipalities or Brevard County expected to continue the vegetation harvesting now that it's been done? So the municipalities will have to get that into their city budgets then?
So we don't require the cities to do that. We just fund the one-time effort, but we wanted them to experience it and see what the benefits are and, see how it works and understand the equipment. For Melbourne Tillman, they actually used the dollars that Swirl provided to purchase equipment. We have used the county dollars to purchase equipment. We've expanded our team, so our program is continuing, will continue.
For the county?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Go ahead.
It was an earlier issue, there were two of them. You mentioned the company that was doing septic and then disappeared. And so I assume that they got paid for something, or is that what the surety bond is, trying to get those funds back if we overpaid them for the work, or where are we
The
with
West
that?
Melbourne.
Yeah,
Right, so they had to post a construction bond, and the city is working with the bonding company
To get the funds back.
to get a second contractor to come in and finish the job.
And then you mentioned real quick that there was a change in the TN reduction levels for the septic, and was that up or down based on the new studies?
I think all you're
Down.
doing,
Down.
all they're
Down.
doing is adding what's coming up to the numbers, right?
The new model, right, took into account all the latest USGS soil conditions, and
Yeah.
when all of that was incorporated into the model, the septic loading went down a little.
Went down. Okay, thank you.
Okay, for oyster bars, there are 26 projects in the plan, and 11 are complete. This quarter was not the construction season for oysters, but the zoo did work on constructing the Coquina Corral wall for the North IRL 2 contract. There are 4 projects in design and 6 are uncontracted. For planted shorelines, there are 10 projects in the plan and 8 are complete. The Titusville Causeway project is underway. Sorrel's providing the cost share for the living shoreline portion of this project. All the riprap has been removed and sand placement has begun along the shoreline. The wads are being installed with approximately 80 left out of the 662 in place. And this photo really shows how the wads are diffusing the wave energy from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. For clam restoration, the plan has funding for 11 farmers, and we have 11 active farmers. This is also a one-time nutrient removing project. And then the 2 IRL clam projects are currently uncontracted, but we have been in discussions and will be moving forward soon. So overall, we have 137,355 pounds in annual TN reductions and 127,223 in one-time reductions for TN, to total 264,578 pounds. The TP is, we have 12,000 in annual reductions and 3,972 in one-time reductions. We have received 203 scopes of work, 194 projects are in or have completed design, 141 are in or have completed construction, and 103 are complete. Here are the nitrogen and phosphorus numbers in a graph showing where we are with the completed projects, projects in progress, completed, and in progress in the plan updates. And financial graph with financial updates with our completed projects, projects in progress, completed, and in progress. And finally, the cumulative total nitrogen reduction for all projects completed with sorrel.
Any questions for Leah?
I have one so simple, I almost hate to ask. The septic tanks, when y'all gave a good report a while back on our county, how many were left? When somebody applies for them now, are they all have to be individual? In other words, if somebody, we know that if somebody comes in for a large project, that they have to be, to a sewage line or so. But we have this huge number of septic tanks, to individual houses, including mine. When you turn in for one now, if you had 4 houses, would that be, could you do that in septic tanks now in King County, or do you have to, where's the line?
So all new septic tanks have to be the advanced nitrogen removing systems.
60%.
You have to connect to sewer if sewer is available,
I knew that.
right? But if sewer is not available, then you still have the right to develop your land, right? Which means you can use the septic
So it
system.
could be multiple houses if it was your land and you had 20 or 30 acres or whatever.
So for larger developments, subdivision scale developments, there are different definitions of how close does the sewer have
Okay.
to be. So, a quarter mile or half mile, depending on
Okay.
the size of the development.
Okay, thank you very much.
On smoke testing, is that going to continue? Do you have neighborhoods that are in the future that you're going to move?
We've completed all the smoke testing that's funded in the plan. We have an application for cities who may still want to do smoke testing, right, through the annual funding application process. But the county has smoke tested pretty much every home that's in the Lagoon watershed.
Good. Thank you. Anything else? Thank you.
And then I get to give you guys the communication quarterly report too. So again, this is for January through March. So we have two graphs here, page views and site users for the Sorrel website. Dark blue is the total, and the orange is new page views or new site users. This quarter, we had 8,400 total page views, 6,400 new page views, and 3,600 total site users, and 2,400 new site users. For the Lagoon Loyal website, again, page views and site users are shown there in the graphs. We had 7,400 page views, 1,600 site users. We had 23 new signups and 37 actions reported for this quarter on the Lagoon Loyal website. And these trend lines are showing the new signups and actions reported on the Lagoon Loyal website. For Sorrel Facebook page, on the left-hand side is showing our follows, and the right-hand side is showing reach. And there's three colors there, but you can't see the dark blue from organic because that is in line with the reach total, because all of our reach is organic. We don't pay for ads, so that's why it's a flat light blue line there. We had 137 new follows, 33,000 reach. We had 2,300 engagements and 301 clicks on our Facebook page for this quarter. Our top two Facebook posts were the Protect Our Waterways fertilizer post that reached 8,500 people, and our Algae Bloom newsletter report that reached 7,800 people. Lagoon Loyal's Facebook page, the left-hand side is showing follows again, and then the reach is on the right-hand side. They had 66 new page likes. They reached 41,000 people. They had 1,200 engagements and 473 clicks. And their top posts this quarter were the Picking Up Pet Waste that reached 5,100 people, and the Protecting Your Seagrass fertilizer post that reached 5,000 people. For our Sorrel Instagram page, again, all of our reach is organic, shown on the left-hand side, and then our interactions on the right-hand graph. We had 37 new follows, we reached 2,500 people, and we had 628 engagements this quarter. And then our top posts from our Instagram page were both related to our 100th project celebration, one post reaching over 1,000 people and another one reaching 560 people. The Lagoon Loyal Instagram page, reach is on the left-hand side and their interactions are on the right-hand side. They had 23 new follows. They reached 4,200 people this quarter and had 374 engagements. And their top two Instagram posts this quarter were the grass clippings post that reached 220 people, and then the Protecting Seagrass Starts With Your Yard that reached 216. Our Sorrel monthly newsletter, the monthly reach trend is on the left-hand side, and then the open rate is on the right-hand side. We reached 2,100 people this quarter and had an open rate of 64%. And then the HAB newsletter had 2,600 people reached and had a 59% open rate. And if you would like more information, you can sign up for our monthly newsletter and check the Lagoon Loyal website for tips and tricks on how you can help the Lagoon. Any questions? Yes.
I can't remember how it's put together on my desktop, but I was just looking on my cell phone. I get asked all the time, what can I do to help the Lagoon? And there's so many volunteer opportunities with links on this one page. Is there a way to make that, and I think I've asked for this before, where it's really, you can't miss it on our webpage? So like, if you scroll down on the cell phone thing, you get down to this bottom thing where there's all these blue bars and all these live links. Could we put volunteer opportunities there also, so that, you know, I can say, go to brevardfl.gov, click on the manatee, scroll down, and then you'll see volunteer opportunities. It's just it's hard to tell people how they can volunteer, and there's so many options.
Yeah.
So many ways they can volunteer.
Yeah, I think we can talk to Brandon about adding that to the website. I thought I remember him
Yeah.
saying something about updating the website. I don't remember if there's it's a little difficult to update it very frequently, but maybe if there's links to like the Brevard Zoo's volunteer page and other groups' volunteer pages, that might be.
Right, I mean, you did bring this up,
Yeah.
and we did ask Brandon to look into it, and
Okay.
I don't remember what the details are, but we can circle back.
That could be a Lagoon Loyal post at one time. Anything else?
Virginia? Just a quick question, or two questions. One, the statement, fantastic that Brandon's tracking all this and really good reporting, and I think we're starting to see really good data. Are we happy with where we're at on it, and how can we boost those numbers? So, on one side, I'm super happy that we have such high-quality product and visuals and telling such a great story. Should we be putting some effort into whether beyond word of mouth to get those numbers out of the hundreds and single-digit thousands? I mean, it's such a good story that, you know,
Yeah, you know.
something on
we-
the neighborhood of 100 times the people in this room are reading something.
Right.
It's a big county.
We struggle with
It
that.
deserves
So
it.
we, you know, we've done 2 RFQs now, trying to select firms that specialize in this, that can help us figure out how to get the word out. We recently selected a new firm. That's part of why you saw some flat areas in the graph, because they weren't started on advertising and things yet. So hopefully we will see that grow here as they get up and running, and the Lagoon Loyal website gets replaced with a new website. But
So,
yeah,
I
we
mean-
would like to reach a lot more.
Okay,
Well, there's
good.
660,000 people in the county, and
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
yeah,
that's
we've got a
kinda
long
where
way to
that-
go.
And you know, following on, I think that's a short-term and a long-term approach too, as we look at future year plans, how are we using this fund? That perhaps is the lawn clippings is a perfect example. Everybody should know that. You know, 9 out of 10 people who mow their lawn should or have a lawn that's mowed should have read that and know that. And we should start to set some metrics perhaps on what do we want to achieve in future years.
Great.
Yes.
Do we monitor media, like articles, TV, and that stuff that's coming out, and put that links to any of that anywhere? I mean, you just had the one story on the algae stuff that was on the news, things like that. Do we push those out?
Brandon, I think, keeps track of like relevant news media, but whether we're sharing them all the time or not is, I don't think so.
It's a mixed bag, and there's a lot of misinformation out there, so,
I mean, you have to pick and choose.
but, you know, then are we blamed for cherry picking? So, I don't know. It's an interesting idea. We can think about that some more.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Well, Todd, welcome back. Good to see you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Pleased to be back here. My name is Todd Swingle. I do serve as the CEO of the Toho Water Authority. I'm also on a variety of both state and national boards focused on public utilities, water, and wastewater policy. And I'm a recovering Sorrel committee member. Although when I left, I didn't know that that was going to turn into more assignments than I ever had when I was on here. So be aware when you get off the committee, it's going to turn into extra work for you. So as we know, this committee has a variety of things you deal with, planning and policy, just the nature of the discussions. A lot of the things that you just saw is about data. Today, no data. That's really not the purpose of what I want to talk to you about. It's much more on the policy front, which at the end does tie into then the data that you need, and ultimately you're going to do data-driven decision-making. But my focus is policy and how that interfaces with the work that you're doing as a committee. I am also an engineer, so just forewarning, we have a tendency to use a lot of acronyms. I will make a promise that as I go through this to try to identify those so that, but please feel free if I'm saying something and I happen to slip and not define that acronym, raise your hand, let me know, and I will try to cover that for you as well. So I want to start with Sorrel and the work that you're doing. And when you look through the different contributors of nitrogen loading and the goal of the overall program to reduce nitrogen loading, we have a variety of different contributions. You've got atmospheric deposition, muck flux, lawn maintenance, natural system restoration that helps, wastewater and stormwater. As we talk about wastewater, one of the things that I'll encourage you to think about is the variety of sources. We talked about already septic tanks, wastewater plants, and other different sources, reclaimed water. So one of the challenges on wastewater is it tends to be a more complex subject because it is not singularly focused on just one way that those sources can contribute nitrogen to the lagoon. And this is a highlight, and again, I'll thank Virginia for supplying me some of the prior charts and data that had been, and this is my acknowledgement to providing you some level of data to support the discussion. But you can see, as you know, muck flux of historic contributions are one of the major contributors. That next bar of groundwater comes from a lot of different sources that you have. Yards that are on septic. Well, even those, it's not just one thing. It could be the septic, it could be your fertilizer that you're adding, other sources that are contributing. Yards that are on sewer, same thing. You talked about leaking laterals, but you also have fertilizer application. Reclaimed water, which does have nutrients in it. Many people still apply significant fertilizer even when they have nutrients. Or have reclaimed water, and then natural areas. All of those compiled together represent that groundwater source. The challenge here is there's not one solution to groundwater. This breakdown really gives you insight of what you need to be thinking about from a project standpoint. I also want to set the stage for moving on more specifically to wastewater. When the Lagoon plan was created, one of the big things was to focus on where we didn't have money, we didn't have programs to advance some of this nitrogen removal. And I pulled a couple of these quotes, and these are directly from the 2025 plan update related to wastewater. Because a capital improvement plan and funding mechanism for updating the county's aging sewer system infrastructure already existed, the original Save Our Indian River Lagoon plan did not include analysis or funding for sewer infrastructure repairs. That is a basis for how projects that were related to sewer, they were not included. The ones that were included were above and beyond. It's also important to note that the funding raised through utility rates goes toward required operation and maintenance of the existing system and facilities, but does not pay for extending sewer service or upgrading the treatment levels beyond permit requirements. Again, quote straight from the plan, and I'll get into a little bit of funding sources for wastewater operations and how those then apply to some of the decisions that you'll have in front of you. So utility funding, traditional utility funding is three main buckets, the first two being the most significant. Impact fees, those support new development. So when you look and you have virgin property being developed, it's never been connected, it's never had a house, it's never had any sort of development. That development is occurring, there is typically a payment of an impact fee. That impact fee, however, one important note, covers things like expansion of your treatment systems and then major transmission to get to those treatment systems. It does not fund the actual infrastructure in that development. That is typically provided by the developer and then transferred, that ownership is transferred to the utility when that development is finished and you begin actually building homes or commercial. That's an important nuance because those individuals are paying for that infrastructure, but it's typically through their mortgage, not through utility rates. So when we start talking about extending into existing development areas, that becomes an important new equity discussion because all of your new development is paying for their own infrastructure that is localized to serve their own homes. Just want to make sure that makes sense. So that becomes an important piece. One of the important pieces on impact fees, it has to increase capacity. If it doesn't increase capacity, it's a renewal and replacement project. It's reinvesting. It has to increase capacity. These are very rigid requirements that are established in state law. User rates and fees, much more flexible. You can do a lot of different things with user rates and fees, but there are some core things that they are used to invest in. First, it's just day-to-day operations, power bills, paying people, chemicals, all of the different things it takes to operate those systems. It's also infrastructure renewal and replacement. So when you think about all of the different pipes that are running throughout the county, as those need replaced over time, it's those user rates and fees that typically provide for replacement of those. So when you have concerns about sewer spills or failing infrastructure, it's these user rates and fees that are typically used to pay for those. They also provide for regulatory compliance. That's one of the things we'll talk a little bit more about what the regulatory requirements are today and moving forward. And then finally is assessments. Those are varied. A lot of places don't do them very often, but assessments can be used. And an example would be in a septic to sewer conversion, that if local government decided that we have an area that we want to provide sewer, you would typically construct that sewer and it has to be paid for somewhere. Sorrel is providing some of those funds in many instances. There can be grants that come in, but often there is a homeowner component. There is typically some flexibility for utilities to do an assessment that would then be paid over time through the property tax bill.
Question. Dropping back here about a paragraph. You said when a development comes, there's the impact fees and what you use the term they're paid for it with their mortgages. So that's a one-time, but it's still a one-time thing. It's not an ongoing.
Yeah, so if you think about it,
I'm
when
asking.
in any given subdivision, you're going to have your water pipes, your wastewater pipes that are right there in that subdivision, and there's a cost for constructing those. Those become part, and it may not be the mortgage, but it is a one-time construction of those that is, when you buy that lot, it's going to be embedded in that lot cost. After it's transferred to the utility, it then becomes the utility's responsibility. Typically, there are some systems will be kept as private. It is more common on major residential developments that they would become public infrastructure. And moving on forward, then the public utility would operate those and then repair and replace those over time.
Thank you.
So again, Sorrel prioritized funding, three real components. Beyond compliance. So what are the things we need to do better to remove more nutrients, to improve the health of the lagoon that aren't the minimums required by regulations. Value, everything you see on your reports talks about dollars per pound. And so what is the value that is being returned so that you're prioritizing your investments in the most positive way? And then no clear funding source. So that's partly tied to this beyond compliance, because we all know funds are limited and your focus is on doing what you have to do. And so when we're trying to move beyond compliance, there's often not a funding source to be able to provide for that. This is a little bit of breakdown of how your funds have been allocated, and you can see that by and large, the nutrients, the investments have mapped very closely with the percentage of nutrient contributions to the lagoon. Two notable exceptions: atmospheric deposition. Pretty hard for us to do a lot with that. The other has been septic tanks, where there has been an overweighted investment in septic tanks compared to the contribution. But that was a conscious decision of this committee, that it was a major contributor, and it was a place that we needed momentum in order to move those programs forward and to get them launched. And so that was, so this is part of why you have this committee, is to make some of those decisions that aren't just pure numbers. Because if there were pure numbers, there would be a lot of these bars that would look a lot differently. And so it is one of the things that I continue to support, is that this committee has a very well-rounded approach to move, and a multi-pronged approach to move lagoon health forward with investments across a lot of different performance areas. So again, beyond compliance projects, over the last several years, you can see a shift even on the wastewater side. The original plan only had 2 of those wastewater plants in place. You can see a number of others have been added over time. Why are those being added? Some of that has been the choices of you as a committee in adopting these projects as they've been submitted. But I'll get into why you're seeing more of these projects that has a lot to do with regulatory and compliance drivers. So times are changing. I have been in this business for quite some time. I think I'm hitting about 35 years now. And it is the most active regulatory environment I have seen in my entire career. You take a look back at wastewater regulations, and they really, about a little over 50 years ago was the advent of the Clean Water Act, and we saw massive changes in regulatory requirements and also federal funding and investments. We're now seeing a renewed interest in wastewater regulations that are driven heavily by nutrients and protection of water bodies, but also emerging contaminants and other concerns that are arising. With that, we're seeing a massive change in new regulations, but what we don't have today is the historic federal funding that was present back when those things just started. Today's federal funding is a fraction of that federal funding that occurred back in the 80s. And if you take a look at some of the budget proposals that are moving through Congress right now, one of the big programs is called the State Revolving Fund, and it has been a huge reduction in the initial proposal in the budget. And that is, so there's challenging, it is becoming a much more challenging environment for utilities and for local governments to be able to plan for these types of improvements. And so hence the interface between things like funding sources through SORL or grants or rates, but also then those compliance requirements and the legislative requirements that are moving forward. So since 2020, we've seen quite a few changes. 2020 was the advent of the Clean Waterways Act, which is Senate Bill 712. A friend of this committee, Senator Mayfield, has been here a number of times. She was the sponsor. I actually presented to her committee when that was adopted on some of the requirements that were there. We'll get into a little more details, but really a very far-sweeping requirement in terms of ramping up performance across a number of areas, including wastewater, septic tanks, and other areas of water quality. In 2021, we saw Senate Bill 64 adopted, which addressed reclaimed water and domestic wastewater discharges across the state, basically requiring that non-beneficial surface water discharges be eliminated. I'll get again into a little bit of details on that. BMAP updates occurred. Those were really 2020, but the report was issued, I believe, in 2021. 2023 moved us into House Bill 1379, having to do with additional environmental protection requirements. 2024, House Bill 1557, some restructuring and shift in program responsibilities for the Department of Environmental Protection. And then 2025, we're in the BMAP update process again, and I'll get into some of those as well. So those legislative focus have really encompassed several different things. A lot of what I'll talk to you about here is going to be septic tanks and wastewater facilities. But the other, another major piece of a lot of that legislation has also had to do with incentives and funding, and then also reporting requirements. One of the things we're seeing a lot more is that increase in reporting to local governments, to the Department of Environmental Protection, but also reporting to the governor and legislature as well, because there is a renewed and a very heightened focus on environmental performance, specifically related to nutrients within the state. I'll cover incentives and reporting. I'm not going to get into a lot of details. These are, there's just a lot of them. At a high level, incentive programs that we're seeing, new and expanded grant programs focused on both resiliency and nutrient removal. Extended permit durations, which has value. So you're making investments that are millions and millions of dollars. Getting a permit that is a little longer duration is very valuable. So there's extended permit durations for meeting your goals, for taking extra steps and things of that nature. And then also expedited permit reviews in certain instances. There is extensive reporting to the governor and legislature. An example of some of those are septic tank conversions and sewer connections, highlighting those rates. Projects aligned with the achievement of BMAP TMDLs, which is Basin Management Action Plans, and total maximum daily loads. And so there's about 25 BMAPs in the state, and those loads represent the maximum load to go into that water body of these nutrients. SSOs, sanitary sewer overflows, and reporting, so when there are sewer spills. Those have a heightened reporting requirement as well. And then how some of those grant programs are being funded and allocated. On the septic tank front, also referred to as on-site treatment and disposal systems, Senate Bill 712, the Clean Waterways Act, was a requirement to implement a fast-tracked approval process for advanced septic. So that was, we're already starting to see that shift to advanced septic. Rulemaking requirements for these locations, so setback requirements from water bodies and things of that nature for siting of these on-site systems. Forming a technical advisory committee to develop additional rules, because this was not something that was really prevalent in the state. Local government requirements to retrofit or upgrade these on-site systems where 20% or more of the nutrient load was from wastewater. And then also adopting a remediation plan for how these existing septic tanks were going to be remediated by July 1st of 2025. And so that is an upcoming deadline. As we moved on, House Bill 1379 started to get into even more detail. So required local plans for providing sanitary sewer services for developments over 50 lots. So getting at these, some of that new development question, so prompting those new developments. It didn't mandate those things in terms of that they have to go a certain direction, but what it did do was require a much more thorough review of the feasibility of extending centralized sewer. And then that had to be embedded in the comprehensive plan updates for local governments. And that deadline has already passed and was back in 2024. Probably one of the most noteworthy changes was here related to the Lagoon, which was the connection to central sewer or advanced septic requirement for all new development by January 1st, 2024. And then for existing properties by July 1st of 2030. That will be a significant one. And so one of the things that as you as a committee think about deadlines and how those work, and that's one that I would really call your attention to because that's not very far away. And so that is one that's out there that directly affects both this committee but our locally here in Brevard and other communities around the state. House Bill 1557 then clarified some of the DEP requirements. Previously, septics had been regulated solely under the Department of Health. Now DEP much more engaged. Moving on to wastewater or public wastewater facilities, back to Senate Bill 712 and the Clean Waterways Act. Again, local government requirements to to develop a wastewater treatment plan, so how those wastewater treatment plant improvements would contribute to achieving TMDLs in these different water bodies, adopting that wastewater plan by July 1st of 2025. I mentioned that we're in that BMAP process, and those draft BMAPs, and I'll get into much more detail on those, are moving forward right now, and they are very specifically intended to comply with this deadline. Biosolids rule revisions, implementing additional depth to groundwater and best management practice, BMPs, reviews. I do want to highlight biosolids as an example. Biosolids misapplied can be a very big problem. They can cause nutrient impairment issues, but also, how many of you have gone to the bathroom recently? Okay? We have to treat that wastewater. Most of our wastewater is treated using biological processes. Biosolids often get mischaracterized as applying human waste. It is not. It is not human waste. We use a biological process of bacteria that consumes human waste, treats that, removes all of that. It is those bacteria that are the biosolids. In many cases, properly applied, that is a very effective soil supplement. Farmers can use it. It avoids additional import of nutrients and fertilizer into the basin, and it is a necessary component. And so we talk about the interconnectivity of all of the decisions we make with other things. As we treat to higher and higher levels and we generate a byproduct, if that byproduct has to go somewhere else, if we incinerate that, if we haul that to somewhere else, that creates additional energy use, that creates additional cost, that, you know, so there is not, these things have a tendency to get looked at in a very narrow bucket, and in reality, there is a lot of interconnectivity between the decisions that we made. And so biosolids absolutely need to be managed effectively, but there are very beneficial approaches to be able to manage biosolids in a way that has productive environmental benefit and avoids environmental impairment as well. Couple other things, wastewater treatment facility discharges to the Indian River Lagoon, IRL, must be by AWT, which is Advanced Waste Treatment, but by July 1st, 2025. That is discharges, though. Note that that's going to be different than just reclaimed water. So reclaimed water is not a direct discharge. So this requirement, again, is very near term. These last two I want to highlight as well because they're not necessarily something that is drastically new for utilities, but what it emphasizes is an enhanced focus of state regulations on wastewater entities. So any utility in Florida knows that we're going to have to deal with hurricanes. We're going to have to deal with very wet weather events. You've got infrastructure that's going to age over time. This puts some more explicit requirements on those. So the first is development of a power outage contingency plan. I know a lot of folks, there will be times that it says that, you know, that I've heard a lot of comments, well, we should put a backup generator at every single lift station. You can do that. That's a lot of mechanical equipment. And again, I've been in this business quite a few years. The most of my systems that I've ever seen out in any given hurricane has been about 60%. So if I've got no more than 60% out, then that means I've got 40% extra infrastructure deployed that's not being used in that event. Now that might still be a good thing that contingency is there, but one of the things is that there's a lot of utility strategies to be able to put standby power, standby pumps at larger, more critical stations that are more susceptible to those impacts, that have higher flows, that need to be responded to more quickly, and then to use portable or other type systems to get to those ones that aren't quite as critical. Because at the end of the day, I would also encourage you to think about the fact that everything we do is a draw on our citizens. So we can spend their money in a lot of different ways, and we need to look at that holistically, because at the end of the day, you know, one of the beauties of Sorrel is that we are pulling in those tourism dollars as well because of the way that tax is generated. But there's still a sizable portion coming from our residents, and we need to make sure that we're using these dollars in a very balanced approach to achieve the environmental benefits that we're looking for, but also considerate of what that does in terms of economic efficiency and that we are truly achieving that balance. It can't just solely be about let's do things the cheapest way possible, nor can it be we can protect anything, but it would be so prohibitively expensive. And so it's that balancing act that we really have to strike. These requirements, and again, I want to commend Senator Mayfield because she and the legislature was very receptive to say, and we as utilities were saying, we're fine with the requirements. We need to figure this out. We need to make sure that we are protective of the environment and the public that we serve. But we also need to do that in a way that helps us at least manage those costs and rates to keep them affordable. That next system, the collection system assessment, repair, and replacement action plans, requires that utilities, as part of their permit renewals, goes in and looks at, that does assessments of the condition of their collection systems, that does thorough analysis of where spills might be occurring, where problematic pipes are occurring, and has a financial plan in place to be able to address upgrades of those systems. And so that is a more formalized requirement than has historically existed, to be purposeful about going in and ensure that those systems are operating as intended.
Quick question. You mentioned the biosolids, and there's an appropriate way to dispose of or use those. How do we identify what's being done and how they're doing, and if it meets that?
So part of that biosolids rule was reviews on the permits for those facilities, and again, implementation of those best management practices, some additional restrictions that said you've got to be a certain distance from water bodies. You can't apply if the groundwater is too close to the surface. So it's a combination of some enhanced restrictions that were scientifically based in order to say, you need to apply these in a way that we don't think they're going to contribute to those problems, but then also through that permitting process.
And is it reported? I mean, is there some place you could go to find that?
It's through DEP. I have not gone in and looked to see exactly where those are at, but it would be through DEP through that permit process.
Same question, I may be caught in definitions here. We're talking about those solids. The solids that were brought here out of the Okeechobee area and dropped, are they included under the same rules?
So that's just some of the facilities. Yeah.
So that means it has to be a certain place and can't be close to the water, and are those requirements there for that? That's good to know.
Yeah, those were revisions in that rule. So there's still biosolids in Brevard. I think Brevard has some. Those are the state laws. Individual local governments can have additional local laws as well.
As the state was developing their new rules, before they were adopted, the county went ahead and adopted a moratorium on any new permits for biosolids application in the county. That was initiated in 2018. We worked with Senator Mayfield to get a special exception to as the new state rules were adopted, there were still questions about whether those rules were going to be protective enough for water bodies that were already impaired, like the Indian River Lagoon. And so we got an exception in there that the county we were listed specifically, Brevard County can keep its moratorium as long as it doesn't change any of those conditions. So over the course of the 5-6 years, there's only one active permit still out there that hasn't expired, right, and no new permits. And that's over in the St. Johns Basin, not in the Indian River Lagoon
That was a question
watershed.
that I assume it goes with St. John's also,
And then DEP, acknowledging that they didn't know everything they wanted to know when they adopted these rule revisions, they also funded, I believe it's four or five different studies that the St. Johns River Water Management District is leading. Those studies are supposed to be completed later this summer, and that data will be fed back to DEP to look at whether they need to, or how they might want to revise their rules further for biosolids.
And I think that's an important piece to note, is that there is a lot, these rules continue to evolve, And in some instances, such as protection of the lagoon, there may be more restrictive measures put in place until you get the scientific data. In other instances where the impacts aren't quite as significant, you can do the scientific research before adopting the rules. But really one of the takeaways is that both the science and the policy continues to evolve, and that is one of the things that translates back into funding challenges. Because think about it with your own house. If you had to comply with the building code that was in place, and you had to do it every time it changed, so you just built your roof, and 5 years later the building code changes, but you have to comply. So that's one of the challenges that happens in this type of operation, is that you've got major infrastructure investments that are generally 30 to 50-year investments, that are plans that you're putting in place, you're putting rate strategies in place, and how that interfaces with policies and the pace of policy change becomes very important too, because that becomes one of the challenges of making sure that you can have appropriately financed infrastructure. And this is where, I can only speak for myself, but as a utility manager, one of the things that I advocate for is I'm a strong advocate of good regulation. Good, predictable regulation for me. I have even made a statement on a national stage that says that I would forego any future grant dollars ever if I could have really sound, predictable regulations. Because the grant dollars that we see for utilities they're important. Don't have no desire to turn away a grant dollar. But in the same token, when rules are unpredictable or they change frequently, the amount of infrastructure investment that happens dwarfs those grant dollars. It's huge. And so this is where I strongly advocate for groups like Sorrel and the wastewater entities that you have here in the county to really partner, because we can do much better as a water sector, as citizen groups, as investments like Sorrel, to really plan for the future and be thinking not about next year and the year after that, but 10 and 20 and 30 years out, so that we're heading in a good direction.
Thank you.
So what I have up here is the 2021 Indian River Lagoon Basin. This is from the Banana River Lagoon. The three different BMAP documents very much mirror each other. I'll call your attention, one of the things that you see here is total nitrogen limits of 3.0. There are companion phosphorus limits too, those are generally at 1. But if you note the right-hand column, the TN concentration for limits for all other disposal methods, including reuse, is set at 10. And so that was the first step in putting limits on reuse to make sure that there were nutrient controls. When I go to the next proposal that's currently in the 2025 plan, you'll see a couple small words that represent a very significant difference. So I'll finish on with some of the other rules that have gone in place. Senate Bill 64, again, across the state, a plan for eliminating non-beneficial surface water discharges. That plan had to be complete by November 1st, 2021 by all wastewater entities, with implementation by January 1st, 2032. So that means that every utility in the state has to eliminate their non-beneficial surface water discharges. That rule also included quite a few other things to promote direct and indirect potable reuse, but promote reuse in general as well to make sure. So this was much more driven by water quantity and some of the water resource constraints that exist in the state. House Bill 1379, which was just passed in 2023, then took that one step further, is that any discharges that were occurring in a surface water in a BMAP area were required to be advanced wastewater treatment. In 2024, there was an additional bill, House Bill 1557, that said that reclaimed water irrigation requirements, if the DEP determines that reclaimed water is causing or contributing to impairment as part of a BMAP, the reclaimed water must be advanced wastewater treatment by July 1st of 2034. And so that is a notable change in the state that says that if DEP finds that any given wastewater plant is contributing to that nutrient impairment, that plant has to upgrade to advanced wastewater treatment. So here we come with,
I'm sorry, Tom. So if we've had a hurricane and we had a lot of water, a lot of rain, and the WWTFs are discharging into the lagoon, in that emergency discharge situation, because they're discharging so the plants don't become overwhelmed, is that the right kind of
Discharge.
is it at the limit that it's supposed to be, or is that kind of overlooked?
it's definitely not overlooked. I mean, that, and it depends on, each individual utility has its own set of permits. So by and large, those discharges, some utilities may have an emergency discharge permit. I can't speak to each individual utility and what those might entail. By and large, utilities are expected to avoid those discharges, but we do recognize that, just like our storm systems aren't designed to handle 20 inches of rain in a day, the wastewater systems get overloaded as well. And so one of the challenges that utilities face is that linkage to storm systems. So every manhole for a wastewater system is out in the street, and so when that manhole is under 2 feet of water, there's probably stormwater getting into those systems. So, but what happens after that is DEP does a pretty exhaustive review of the actions that those utilities took, what spills were reported, and determines whether it was so extensive that it was an act of God, that the utilities did or didn't do the things that they should have done to prepare for that. If they didn't do the things that they should have done to prepare for that, then they will typically get some form of fine, and associated with that fine is some form of consent order that says, here are the things that you need to do to improve your system to address what we observed. And that is a very site-specific consent order review that says, what are the conditions? And it may be that the conditions were just so bad that there's really not much you could have done. But in other instances, you'll find that the utility wasn't prepared, they didn't have their power contingency plans in place, the infrastructure was already failing, things of that nature, and then the answer will be different.
Okay, thank you.
So on these new BMAPs that are coming out in 2025, on that far right column, you see a slight change. That it says wastewater treatment plants not listed in Appendix G, all other disposal methods including reuse. So it still has the 10, but they've added Appendix G, which ties back to that legislative mandate that says that DEP can determine which wastewater facilities they consider to be causing or contributing. In this instance, this is the list in the Central Lagoon. This is the list in the North Lagoon, and this is the list in the Banana River Lagoon. And from a practical standpoint, it's every wastewater treatment plant in Brevard County. Now, DEP is still working through some of this. They had a pretty tight time schedule. It's entirely possible that some of these may not be listed. The utilities have the opportunity to demonstrate or prove that they're not causing or contributing to that impairment. But because of that change in the BMAP, that would prompt all of these utilities, any of these wastewater plants, to upgrade to advanced wastewater treatment, even if they're not discharging to the lagoon. So it would affect their reuse water as well. Again, just because they're listed here, these plans are in draft. That doesn't mean they will stay that way, but in order to not be listed here, that utility will have to prove that because of how they manage their system, where their discharges are located, the levels of nutrients that they operate at, that they are not causing or contributing to nutrient impairment within the lagoon. Now, again, I mentioned and talked about the challenges of these changing regulations. So this is a little bit of the anatomy of a wastewater project, so just to put it into perspective. And I will tell you that this is an optimistic timeline. This is a timeline that works if everything goes right. You can easily, on the planning front, 1 to many years. I've seen wastewater projects take 10 years or longer to plan. If you really got it together, maybe you can get it done in 1, but that's tight. Design and bidding, 2+ years. I've seen that go 3 or 4 or more. Don't forget that in parallel to this, you've got to be planning for these projects. These projects, I got some data the other day that showed that historically we were running about $15 to $20 a gallon on new wastewater plant construction. That's only 5 years ago. I've seen projects as high as $40 to $60 a gallon now. So we've seen wastewater and industrial construction significant, even as high as inflation has been, this type of construction is outpacing inflation. And when you think about setting rate plans and things of that in place, it's very challenging. Construction then 2 to 3 years, that's usually pretty good. It's uncommon that it would go drastically because any given contractor that's getting in there, they're wanting to get in there and get the work built. So that number is pretty good. Then this is the big one, the operations life. These projects are tens of millions. Some of the bigger ones can even be hundreds of millions of dollars. In order to manage that infrastructure expectively, you're expecting to get 30 plus years out of it. If 5 years later, that plant has to be modified because of another change in a regulation, that's one of the challenges. So that's where that predictable regulation, so that we're thinking as far ahead as possible, is really important. We're talking about nutrients here, but I want to put on my supportive hat for all of your utility directors around here. They got a lot coming at them, and it's not just nutrients. You've got resource limits on water. You've got resiliency. We talked about power outages, things of that nature. You've got nutrients, but you've also got emerging contaminants. There's recently been issued new rules on drinking water standards that may also affect wastewater discharges for PFAS. They've been in the news obviously over here with Patrick Air Force Base and other places. They're common in firefighting foams. Every single one of us has these in our body. They come, your Teflon pans that you cook with have them in them. I mean, it's not just firefighting foams. It's if you have a waterproof jacket, it was in those materials. They're very pervasive. Those utility leaders also have to manage different functions, reclaimed water, collections, biosolids. They all interface. So when we just talk about one of these regulations, it's not as simple as that. Each one of those regulations affects the others when it comes to operating that utility. And at the end of the day, every one of these plants is in place to support the public and provide public value. And this is about what it looks like, because it gets a little chaotic putting all those pieces together. So as that turns back to this committee, I would encourage you to kind of reframe a little bit of your funding and what that looks like. Collection rules have been strengthened. That's still an operating requirement. I don't know that changes much in your approach. Historically, and one of the quotes I included early on, there was a funding source in place. There were requirements on utilities to operate effectively. Sorrel hasn't traditionally funded collection system improvements and R&R from that standpoint. But on the treatment side, beyond compliance is now compliance for both wastewater and the on-site systems. Things that previously didn't have a funding source, didn't have a requirement, now do have those requirements. So I encourage this committee to really think about that. Hence my questions over here on the right. How do we handle these changing rules related to funding priority and eligibility? How does accessibility of funding sources affect our priorities? These wastewater plants have to upgrade. That's now a compliance requirement. It's their obligation to figure out how to pay for those as well. That being said, this is a funding source that's intended to benefit the citizens of this community. And so it's not as simple of an answer as it might have been 7 or 8 or 10 years ago. Rates are a funding source, but wastewater investment needs are growing. So how does that affect the decisions that you make? And then there's trade-offs with other project types, capital investments, utility costs, wastewater treatment facility upgrades versus individual costs on a septic. Any given homeowner, they can get a second mortgage. That's probably a little harder when you're talking thousands of individuals, people in a lot of different economic circumstances, as opposed to a utility that maybe has more bonding capacity and things like that. But that trade-off, because ultimately every drop of this money is coming from our citizens regardless. And so figuring out what works best of the choices that you make with this interface of policy, with the interface on the citizens and the investments that they make, and those borrowing capabilities. And then just the value of the Sorrel investment choices. It's not always going to be as simple, and septic tanks is one of those good examples of where the cost for nitrogen removal on septics has been higher, but it's also been one of the best opportunities to leverage state dollars and other matching dollars that have been brought into the community, that if there wasn't that overweighting on the septic side, you wouldn't have been able to capture those external funding dollars. So thinking about not only the dollars that you're allocating, but the multiplier effect as those go into other funding sources that you're bringing into the community. And then thinking as well that cost per pound of nutrients revolved or removed, because there's always needs to be that thoughts about efficiency. But it's not. But it's one of those, and I talk to a lot of our staff all the time that with KPIs, they're indicators. They're not decision makers. They are data that we should use to influence us using our brains and listening to people and factoring in things that won't always have pure numeric answers to them. And I think this cost per pound of nutrients removed is one of those, that it is a good start of making your decisions, but your decisions are much more complicated than that. And at the end of the day, adapt, adapt, adapt. Everything's changing. Costs, regulatory requirements, funding availability, priorities, all of those things. I encourage this committee to continue to think not only in the plans that you have and just the projects and the concrete projects that are right in front of you, but how these things interface with all of the other policy elements, where they're regulatory in nature, growth management policies, those kinds of things. That was probably a drum that I continued to beat when I was up here. It was that we do need to be thinking about how the work that we're doing interfaces with growth management policies, so that things aren't undoing the work that's already being done. So glad to be back here. Happy to take any questions. Other than the extra work, nice to see that. I'm looking forward to the conversations and the decisions that you as a committee make, because they're important and they're impactful, and it's not just, and these are happening not just here but across the state as well. And so happy to entertain any questions.
I have a question. Todd, thank you. That was a really nice overview of what it's like to work in the water wastewater industry, which I did for about 30 years. My question for you is, from your informed perspective as a former member of this committee, how well do you think we do in Brevard County to plan regionally for the big issues that involve wastewater? It strikes me, I'll let you answer the question, but it strikes me that we're pretty, we do a good job, but we're pretty scattered in terms of where the real responsibility lies. I'm aware of some things that are happening up related to the Space Center. Where do you think we need to go, and how well prepared do you think we are to deal with these longer-term growth management issues that you raised?
Yeah, so I operate a utility that is not here, and so I'm hesitant to comment on the specific status of any given utility or their planning. But I will address what do we need to do. And for me, what we need to do is to work collaboratively. And it's not just in any given space. It's not just in the government space. It's not just in the utility space. It is to work collaboratively to understand what our priorities are. It is to launch those hard discussions about not just what needs to happen next year, but be thinking about very far out. That is one of the tendencies that I see across the space, is that there has a tendency to be thinking far out, might be 5 years, maybe 10. And the reality is, given back to my timeline, if you conceptualize a project today, it's not out of the ground for at least 5 years. 7 to 10 is probably more likely. And so if we're not thinking 20 and 30 years out, then we're missing the boat on where we need to go. But we've got to launch those harder discussions too, because what you run into is planning for 20 years out and paying for it today ends up being a tougher challenge, and especially when you've got the economic environment that we've got, where you've got rising costs and variable interests and all those kinds of things, and it gets hard to create a sense of urgency for something that the benefit's going to be 20 years out. So I see that as one of the biggest barriers of how do you ramp up the conversation about the importance and the investment needs today for something that the reality is, if we don't invest in it today, it probably doesn't hurt us that much tomorrow or next year. But the further out we go, the more impact it has. And it's, again, talk to people a lot of the times, you know, if you dig a hole, you don't fill the hole back in right away. That hole gets filled back in probably at about the same pace that it got dug. And so that, for me, is the biggest challenge, is creating that sense of urgency and priority and working collaboratively to have a longer-term plan.
And I didn't mean to put you on the spot with this, because I know our utility folks in the county and in the state of Florida do a really wonderful job with that very difficult balance that they have to make. I just wonder if we have the right structures. I mean, is the county level enough to drive it, or is there something else that we need? So a question for the table, you don't have to answer that.
No, and I can't, I mean, there are all kinds of different structures, and some work well for, I think, again, it goes back to those become very individual choices. I've seen authorities and consolidation work in some places. I've seen, you know, just well-operated, long-planning utilities for a single local government that have worked well. In everything I deal with, the thing I see is that there's never a one-size-fits-all approach, but having both the sense of urgency and the flexibility to make the right decisions is really key.
Great, Fred.
You raised kind of an interesting issue. So if we think about it, the utility company, our citizens pay for that. In essence, we're paying for it. And the same hand, with Sorrel, we're paying for it, except we get a chunk, decent chunk, from tourism and things like that, and I'm sure utilities have chunks that maybe come from the Fed, just like we do. So should we look at projects and say, if they do X, it's going to cost the citizens this. If we do X for them, it's going to cost the citizens Y. And there's a lost cause for what we might have done elsewise in that case.
Absolutely. I mean, I think at the end of the day, delivering the objectives, which are, you know, public health and the environment at the lowest cost to our residents possible, is the end game.
Right.
So, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Orly.
So Deb opened up the box with her comment about the Space Center, but for her atmospheric deposition, it was like the fourth highest contributor to nutrients in the lagoon. And we're having, you know, these proposed dramatic increase in launches at the Space Center. And so you've got Brevard County citizens paying to clean up the lagoon, but I don't see a whole lot of activity going on at the Space Center. How can we, you know, create a sense of urgency from the federal government to do their part on monitoring and cleaning up the pollution that they're causing from rocket launches?
I'm a simple utility guy, so somebody else is going to have to answer that one.
That's a complicated one.
Well, I was going to say, you know, those emissions too are from car exhaust and from power plants. You know, we can buy electric cars to help do that, you know, to reduce that, but it's an unregulated, you know, because it's mobile emissions, so it's not a stationary source, rocket launches, so they're pretty much off the table when it comes to regulations.
Could I make a recommendation too, that maybe, I mean, I just read a study on nitrogen coming out of exhaust of the rocket nozzles and whether it's impactful or not, depending on height, et cetera. But there's more and more data coming out, and then obviously you have the water systems and the others. It would be nice to be able to get some information or some data distributed. I'd be interested in it, on that, to understand what are the impacts that we know today. I've talked to the professor at Utah who's done the sound studies down at Starbase, and he just released a report in February that shows a map taking those data and applying it to our area, so we get a sense of dBs at various distances, and I think those kinds of things would be good to know. Now, what we can or can't do with that, I have no idea at this point, but yeah. Is it possible to get a presentation on that? Or would it be meaningful?
Can you send me that paper? Can you
Sure, and I'm
put me
going to
in
talk
touch
to the
with those
professor in June. He
people,
said he
or-
was too busy, the one from Utah, about that.
Okay. But maybe we can, you know, find out how far out do we have to go to get him on our calendar?
Sure.
Thanks, Todd.
Can I get one more question? And just more theoretical, great presentation, good to see you back, Todd. With all the advanced wastewater treatment plants coming on, do you see a more beneficial use of their effluent? Is something that maybe could be used for other applications, maybe even going back into the potable water system?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's a very localized discussion. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. The state just in, I think, February, it's either February or March, did formalize the potable reuse regulations that cover both indirect and direct potable reuse. So that is a possibility. There's utilities within the state and then certainly nationally that are looking at both forms of potable reuse, so either directly into water supply or back to the environment to then, could be, that goes into a groundwater storage, then comes back as potable supply. But, and it really is a journey for utilities, because even for a utility that's using it for irrigation, one of the things I advocate for is treating water like water. And so just because it's reuse doesn't mean that you can't have conservation and use reuse effectively. That being said, it is, at its core, it is also the disposal mechanism for those wastewater plants. And so it's our irrigation use and other things are not linear, and so making sure that you're able to handle wet weather variations, because it's the worst of both worlds. When you get a lot of rain, people stop using, or they don't stop, but they certainly cut back. And that if you have any infiltration and inflow issues, you get more wastewater, and so you've got to be able to store that. And so absolutely, yes, but it's, again, a utility-specific decision that needs to be made based upon, there may be certain utilities that have a higher industrial base, others that have a higher residential base, some that are more mature in their processes. How can you get those rules through? So again, I would encourage all the communities to look at their specific situations and to look at this as a journey. One of the things we plan for is everything that we do on a strategic initiative, we're looking at maturity model approaches. It says, here's where we want to be on down the road. We know we can't get there right away. Here are the steps to get there. And so I think everyone should be tackling your question as in that maturity model type approach. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Todd. You're always welcome back. And next we have Josh Hibbert with Sewage Lateral Repair Program.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Josh. I'm the contract administrator for Sorrel. But I also manage the homeowner grant program for the leaking laterals. So that's what we'll be going over today. I know it's been brought up a couple times already, smoke testing and leaking laterals, so that's cool. If you're very familiar with it, good. If you don't know anything about it, that's fine. I would say, excuse me. The next, sorry. The next 10 minutes or so will be life-changing either way. So, and while I get over this, it's okay, we're gonna watch a video. We'll all get up to speed. So one of Brandon's beautiful videos, that's what I call them. So Logan, if you don't mind, if you can hear me, please roll the video.
We're here today in Merritt Island where we are doing smoke testing to look for deficiencies in the sewer and lateral lines.
So the county's involvement is we're contracting USSI to perform the smoke testing on our behalf and also on the behalf of Natural Resources Department. They're the funders through the Sorrel program.
This is a interdepartmental project. The Natural Resources and Save Our New River Lagoon program is coming in to help the property owners address their side of the problem.
So smoke testing is one process that we can do to find defects, where they pump a non-toxic smoke down into the pipelines and it will come out of the ground or broken pipes, missing clean-out caps, any areas where there might be a defect.
So the smoke is produced by using, it's essentially a lawnmower with an inverted propeller, and what we do is we use a safe vegetable oil.
We heat that up on the carburetor, and what it does is that fan then pushes that vegetable oil into the system. It goes about 1,200 feet in either direction, but what that does is that every house is plumbed into the sewer system, so as that smoke is pushing through the system, it's supposed to come out of the vents on a house. That means your house is properly plumbed. Where smoke comes out of the ground as a clean out or a manhole lid and cover or a service line, our crew will use our software. They take a GPS of it, they take an image of it, they use temporary spray paint to document it. So the intent is to do a full defect report, and that data is then provided to the utility with Brevard County to process and determine what to do with it after that.
What we want to do is we want to reduce the amount of stormwater that's running off from rain into these openings. And then also there's groundwater beneath the grass, and the pipes are oftentimes submerged in that, believe it or not. And so if there's cracks or openings in the pipe, then you have water entering the pipe. The pipe's not under pressure, so the water's going to go into the pipe, and that's going to be moved along to the pump stations. What does that mean for the utility? We're treating groundwater, or we're treating rainwater, and that's unnecessary really for us.
And when we have heavy rain events such as Hurricane Irma, that water can overwhelm the system and lead to sewer overflows. We're trying to prevent sewer overflows because that is another source of nutrients into the lagoon. The smoke testing projects are funded with the Save Our Indian River Lagoon half-cent sales tax, and we also use that funding to leverage state grants to help expand the program and cover more area, and also to help us provide financial assistance to homeowners.
So we also have other grant programs for homeowners to do things like upgrading a septic system, or for homeowners that are already along an existing sewer line, we have a Quick Connect grant to help alleviate those costs as well.
If a property owner needs assistance, they can contact us at irlproject@brevardfl.gov.
All homeowners in the county can get involved with restoring the Indian River Lagoon by visiting lagoonloyal.com. On that site, they're going to find simple tips that they can do around their own home to reduce their nutrient pollution footprint.
Everybody like that one? It's pretty good. So here's just a brief overview of pretty much what they talked about in that video. But I found the most interesting part of this is probably the door hangers. So that way people are aware and they don't start looking out the window and thinking the whole neighborhood's on fire or whatever. So, so I'm glad they do that. But if you're going to take away anything from this presentation, it's going to be up there in the upper left. That's really what repairing the leaking laterals is, the overarching purpose and goal of it is to reduce the amount of inflow and infiltration, which is a fancy way of saying water that shouldn't be going in there. That affects the lift stations and can cause overflows eventually at the treatment plants when there's heavy rainfall events or hurricanes. So that's what we're trying to do with this. So far, we have smoke tested over 442 miles of sewer. There is a code enforcement component to this, and of the 761 cases that have been opened, 719 have already been resolved. It's 94.5% compliance. And then there's also been 20 voluntary repairs, which are people that don't have a code enforcement case, but they have documented that their sewer lateral needs to be repaired, and we've helped them with that. As far as the smoke testing, there's a lot of different defects that can be identified. The most common ones are missing cleanouts, caps, and broken cleanout caps, but it's a host of other issues that can be identified through smoke testing. Speaking of cleanouts, here's a cracked one. This is a real-life defect that was identified through a recent round of smoke testing. Does anybody know or have an idea of how that cleanout got cracked?
It's lawnmowers.
Yeah, I would say probably 99 or maybe 100% of the cracked cleanouts are because of somebody running it over with a lawnmower. And then I imagine they finish mowing their lawn and put the lawn in the shed and go in and have ice cold beverage of choice and a snack, and then they go on with their life, you know, and forget it, or maybe even not even know that they broke it. So it happens often. Here's another one. It's what they call an illegal connection. It's this one, just a random pipe coming from out behind the property there, just dumping into a wide open clean out. So problem with that is the clean out not having a cap to, let alone with whatever is they're dumping in there. So that was fixed. The next one, I hope everybody's sitting down because it's pretty wild, but there were many of them, but that's why we do it. So you have just a wide open manhole, no lid. You can see tons of the smoke coming out. It kind of looks to me like that also is at a lower elevation or at some sort of, there's an incline away from it. So when it rains, I imagine that there was probably a lot of stormwater dumping into that, and for who knows how long. Also, I think little Timmy probably could have fallen into something like that, or somebody's beloved pet, or whatever. It's dangerous. So that's okay, because we did the smoke test and we found it and it's been repaired. So, but there were others too. So now with the smoke test, this is what the report looks like. This is an actual one too, but I wanted to show you what the customer or property owner receives. There is as I mentioned, there is a code enforcement aspect to this. So they don't just get this report. It's not just knock, knock, here's your report, FYI, and then nobody ever follows up on it. So the code enforcement is managed by the Utility Services Department here with the county. The customer will get that report that I just showed you, along with a courtesy letter that has Sorrel's information if they want to apply for a grant to help pay for the repair. 30 days later, if there's no response or the repair is not made, they get what's called a notice of violation. And that part, it really goes from 0 to 100 from the courtesy letter to that. It's like 4 pages. It's a lot of legalese and things saying what's going to happen if you don't do the repair. Should they not respond to that? Most do. Pretty much everybody responds to the second one. But if not, then they'll receive a notice of hearing. And they also get that one posted physically on their property with a wooden stake right there for everybody to see. And then at that point, there's enforcement costs and daily fines that accrue up until they make the repair. Thankfully, there's only been a handful of those that I'm aware of. And most people that I talk to, I guess I failed to say my previous position was doing this with utilities before I came over here. So most people that I talk to, and I think you'll be happy to know, they want to make the repair. They're happy to do it, and they're happy we did the smoke test. And they all say, I want to do it because I love the lagoon, just like us. So, yeah, luckily there's very few of those that go in front of the special magistrate. And then lastly, the grant program. There are funding available up to $10,000 to replace the entire lateral. And many times it can cost that much to do that. Usually it's for older homes where it's made out of cast iron or Orangeburg or whatever it is that it's completely failing. And then we provide $2,000 for smaller clean-out related repairs. Those don't cost that much, but it's there if it does. It's reimbursement based, but we do have 7 contractors that are pre-approved. So we can pay them directly, which is a pretty nice convenience for the property owner, so they don't have to pay out of their pocket and wait for the reimbursement. And then the grant, though, it's only for lateral repairs. We're not doing renovations or cosmetic things in the bathroom and stuff like that. So, and also, they don't need to have a code enforcement case. If they're aware that they need a repair and they're able to provide evidence, either through photographs or video, we can accept that and help them make the repair so long as they're within the Indian River Lagoon watershed. And here's a nice flyer that we give them too with the notice of violation and courtesy letter so they can get in contact with us. And that's all I got. Anything? Nothing?
Any questions?
Thanks for listening.
Thank you. And we have Virginia.
Yeah, so your agenda says performance monitoring. What we're trying to do over the next several months is work our way through the plan, the different project types. How do we select those projects? What are those projects? How's it going? You know, what are all the considerations for those projects? And then what does the performance data show for the projects that have been completed to date? The agenda said performance monitoring, but I wanted to back up a bit and talk about the project selection as well. And so a lot of what I'm going to say overlaps with Todd's presentation, but just to, back some of that up. So just before we were tasked with coming up with the Save Our Lagoon plan, we had been working on the basin management action plans, the total maximum daily loads, and trying to understand what the sources of pollution were. So this is flow station data. USGS has a number of flow stations in the major tributaries in the county and a number of other locations. And so the vertical axis is how high the flow rate was, right? And across the bottom axis is time. So how does that flow rate change through time? And so you see, it's very dynamic, and the peaks are large rainfall events when you have a higher flow rate, and the troughs are when it hasn't rained for a while, and that is the groundwater seeping into the tributaries, causing that continued flow even though there was no rainfall. And so if you look at the troughs where it's all gray, that water is primarily groundwater. And when we take a sample of that and look at the nutrient concentration, it was high. It was unusually high for groundwater, and that's what led us to realize, our groundwater is a major source of pollution to the Indian River Lagoon, and we've got to figure out what's polluting it and address those sources. So obviously, the first thought is septic systems, right? And so, we went through a process, we went through several iterations of modeling the septic loading from every single home on septic and business on septic in the county, and then, identifying clusters. You see on the right, all those yellow dots, clusters of highest loading systems where it makes sense to bring new sewer service to that community and get all those homes connected. And so we went through this process, and you see the list of names on the left, right? Not very creative names, just following the alphabet, because we went through the county and we just circled all these clusters, and then for each cluster, like how many lots is that? estimate the cost based on linear footage of sewer that would have to be installed, how many lift stations, right? And then we have this model of what is the loading impact of those systems on the lagoon. So that's, if we stopped that by connecting them to sewer, that's a reduction. We can come up with a cost per pound benefit, right? We did that countywide to come up with the projects that were in the plan. But when we did that, and all the modeling, indicates that septic systems are responsible for right around 20% of the nitrogen, excess nitrogen entering the lagoon. So groundwater is 50 to 60% of the loading going to the lagoon. So septic is not the only problem. Right, so that led us to a more, broader approach of what are these other sources of pollution to the lagoon. This is the graphic that Chuck Jacoby used last month, and it's really primarily on what are those stormwater sources. Some of those some of the things that pollute stormwater also pollute groundwater, right? So think of agriculture. Right? You have agricultural runoff that is polluting the stormwater, but you also have excess fertilizer that is soaking down into the groundwater and is contributing to groundwater pollution. However, in Brevard's portion of the Indian River Lagoon, we have very little agriculture left. So, that's not it. So, what are these other groundwater pollution sources? And there are not a lot of good candidates out there to try to find cost-effective options to go after. But one of the things we thought of was this irrigation water. So every wastewater treatment plant has a permit, like Todd said, and each of them has individual requirements according to their permit, but they all have some sort of monitoring component. Some are monthly, some are quarterly, some are annually. Some have to monitor for different things, but they have to monitor for nitrogen on some sort of frequency. And so this is a fraction of a report for one of our utilities, and you see the nitrogen concentration there. 2.2, that's less than the 3 milligram per liter that is the advanced wastewater standard. The number of exceedances there, 0, right? So that's all good. But we could go to these reports for every wastewater system, including the private package plants in the county, and average them over time. So we looked at a 3 to 5 year period of record and identified, what is the average concentration of the effluent coming out of each plant. And then we compared that to, well, how much could a sod yard absorb? And so everything that's above that red line is probably soaking into the groundwater and becoming a problem. And so we looked at, all right, so for these facilities, what is the permitted capacity, right? What is the volume? What is the concentration? How much load is that? Now, a lot of that is attenuated by the sod or attenuated in the soils over the pathway before it gets to the lagoon. So what is the attenuated load that actually gets to the lagoon? And if we upgraded that system, what would that upgraded attenuated load be? What would the difference be? Right, so then we went through, and for each system, what would it cost to upgrade? We had actual cost proposals from Palm Bay and Titusville. Nobody else in the rapid fire that we had to pull the plan together had costs available, so we used an EPA standard of $6 million for an upgrade. It costs way more than that now, as Todd alluded to, right? But what is the load reduction? What's this average cost? So we could rack them and stack them just like we did with our septic neighborhoods. So this is the data from Titusville wastewater treatment plant, one of those first 2 highest priorities. And the blue line is the effluent coming out of the plant. And so you see the blue line was, spiking fairly high pre-upgrade. The dotted line, the dotted vertical line is when the partial upgrade was completed. The solid vertical line is when the upgrade was was done. And then you see after that time, the blue line, the effluent coming out of the plant, is well down below the target of our contract with Titusville for 6 milligrams per liter. And the green lines are the 3 private homeowner groundwater wells that we installed to monitor the system, the impacts of this project pre and post. And so you see, some high green spikes before the project, and you only see one little green spike recently after the project. That could be, fertilizer application that day or something. On the left box and whisker plot shows you, what was the variation and what was the mean and central tendency of the data before retrofit versus after retrofit. So now we know these projects, or at least this project, works. So this is just a snip of a fraction of the table of contents in the plan, right? So today we talked about wastewater treatment facility upgrades. And so that would impact the effluent coming out of the plant. It would impact reclaimed water. Not all effluent is used for reclaimed water. Some of it is sprayed in spray fields to get rid of it. Some of it goes into rapid infiltration basins. So we also looked at what could we do to make the spray field attenuate more nutrients, or to make the rapid infiltration basin attenuate more nutrients. Racked and stacked them just like everything else to come up with the highest priorities in the plan. Private packaged plants, right? There are a number of those. We also looked at their effluents, right? We went through those same reports they have to provide to DEP and prioritize them. Do we connect them to sewer, or is there some upgrade that we can do at their site? Josh just talked to you about our sewer lateral program. Next month, we're going to be on septic to sewer and septic system upgrades. The month after that, we'll be focused on stormwater treatment. And the month after that, we'll be on muck removal in the lagoon. So just a taste of what's to come. And so then Todd talked about this, right? And I've shared this before too, right? We have more than just those 3 wells in Titusville. We have 44 wells. And so these are the groundwater concentration data from natural systems, septic system communities, sewer communities, reclaimed communities before, and then this is Titusville after. But we used this data to then be able to take this total groundwater load and differentiate it into these 4 columns that Todd shared with you, like how much of that load countywide is from yards on septic versus yards on sewer versus reclaimed water. And then we can look at, produce this graph to show, to compare how the funds are allocated to where the loads are coming from. While I'm up here, I just wanted to share 2 more little tidbits. Todd also talked about, and Fred, you followed up with, it's not just that we have this lagoon money, we're able to go get grants to, leverage our own funding with tourism contributions and grants. So the House and Senate are still working through the budget process for this year. The Indian River Lagoon Restoration Program, that was part of the bill a couple years ago, creating this $100 million a year program for funding for grants for the Indian River Lagoon. There's no $100 million there, right? There's $50 million in the Senate proposal, there's 0 in the House proposal. So we're not expecting a good year of grants. If you look at these other lines, there is agreement, 50 million, the lines below the yellow, agreement for Springs restoration, for the Keys, and for Biscayne Bay. There's still just above the yellow, hundreds of millions of dollars proposed for the Everglades. All of this funding had been coming from the Seminole Gambling Compact, right? That was a rule change last year that those revenues would fund water projects for the state of Florida. So the House is now proposing to repeal that earmark, and the Senate is saying, well, let's cap it at $300 million a year. But if you cap it at $300 million a year, it does not cover the $350 million proposed for the Everglades, plus the $90 million for Springs and the Florida Keys and Biscayne Bay, right? Even if the lagoon is at zero. So this is going to be a really tough session for us, and I mean, it's always fun to share bad news, right? But I thought you needed to know.
Wow.
All right, so that's, yes.
Virginia, I understand that the rationale they're using is that, especially for the land conservation, is that there's money already in the bank and they haven't spent it all, but it doesn't seem to take into account the process of acquiring lands, making the purchases, and I wonder, is the lagoon in the same boat? Pardon the poor analogy there, but.
I don't know what the backlog is of those dollars. Certainly, when you propose a whole new grant program, $100 million a year, 2 years in a row, right? People are running as fast as they can to get those projects designed and permitted and break ground. But yeah, probably a lot of those dollars are still sitting in the bank, haven't been reimbursed yet.
Just ask her.
But that's what you have to have, that certainty that the dollars are there so that you can get the project going.
Can we get this presentation and also Todd's presentation given to the group, please?
A lot of great information.
Yeah, you can see now drinking with a fire hose, people.
Yeah.
This is what it's all about. Go ahead, Fred.
Just a quick question and a comment. So I was in D.C. this week at doing some healthcare legislation advocacy work, and I happened to meet. He was with AIDS, as is typical, but in Congressman Herodopoulos' office, he was there. And so I talked to him about the lagoon, and he mentioned 2 bills possibly that they're looking at to get money down here. Are you aware of that and working with them on that, or is there anything we should look at or do around that?
So we have 2 proposals that we had worked with Congressman Posey, and we were in the appropriations bill last year, but then all of that was zeroed out with the continuing resolution that was passed for the current federal fiscal year. So we've been working with Congressman Herodopoulos' office and his staff on updating and resubmitting those proposals, which he has agreed to do, and that's been done. Great. So, yeah, I believe those are the 2 projects you're
Okay,
talking
thanks.
about.
Yeah, he was very positive. It was a quick one as he was heading out the door, but
Yeah, no, they've been super helpful to work with.
great.
Thanks.
Next up.
Thank you.
Oh, this is, I'm going to try to shorten this a lot because we've covered a lot of this, but I saw the same thing. I come from a regulatory background, and I saw the same thing happening that Todd mentioned, was that, golly, a lot has happened in the last 5 years that just is overwhelming to us all. But anyway, I also wanted to follow up with Virginia's presentation last month and show you where the data came from that she was using, and make sure that you understand that, because this all started with the Clean Water Act, as Todd said, in 1972. And it wasn't until, well, the data started in 1987. So the data goes from 1987 through present. And it was really started for that for the 1990s, when we were finally provided guidance on the impaired waters, on what it means to be impaired waters. And then the IRL and the BRL, the Indian River Lagoon and the Banana River Lagoon, were both listed as impaired. And but even before that, in 1989, was the swim plan that was done by the Water Management District. And that showed, as Virginia mentioned in an earlier presentation in March, that 40% pollution in the Indian River Lagoon was from wastewater and 60% was from stormwater, and we had to start looking at muck, and there would be a problem. There could be a problem there with muck. And so, anyway, we got the impaired waters declared. It wasn't until 2009 we got the total maximum daily load developed for the Indian River Lagoon system. And in that time, we got the seagrass die-off and the super bloom and all that time. All that happened too. That was independent of all this happening. And so in 2013, the first BMAPs were developed. And 2016 was for the Indian River Lagoon program, soil program here. But then in the 2020s is when it really a lot happened. The BMAPs were looked at again with the new modeling in 2021, and now they're being revisited. Those are really the source of a lot of the projects that come into the program here. But then I wanted to mention the Clean Water Act. First I wanted to mention the System and Basin Act of 1990. That was when really the surface water discharges, the wastewater treatment plant discharges were eliminated from the lagoon, and also required looking at the alternative of wastewater reuse. And we know the problem that we're facing now with wastewater reuse. And encourage the collection of centralization and collection of treatment in the IRL basin. So that was back in 1990. BMAPs we've gone over. The Clean Waterway Act, it transferred septic tanks from DOH to Department of Health to DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection. Required all wastewater treatment facilities to go to AWT, but it didn't give any date requirement there. New requirements for preventing sanitary sewer overflows and underground pipeline leaks, and required the passage of the stormwater rule. This was back in 2020. It required the passage of the stormwater rule, and we had been encouraging this all along. And then the BMAPs for agriculture and golf courses. Best management practices. Got to define those acronyms. And then the House bill, Todd's already gone over this really well, but this is a real game changer because it put dates on things actually. And there's the last one is the $100 million that you heard disappointingly was a promise that's not going to be held. But this is from a determination regarding the necessity of wastewater treatment plans. This was a DEP Office of General Counsel determination to get these wastewater treatment plans done and the on-site treatment plants done. This is something you should really get from Virginia. These are really good, these are good plans. They're for the future, the next 20 years, and they're good reference documents for you all to reference and see where the county is going to go with sewage treatment plans, plant plans, and also those on-site systems that won't go into sewage treatment plant plans. So something to think about and to get and read. Then we have finally the stormwater rule. The stormwater rule was passed finally, and it does beef up stormwater regulations in general, and this kind of goes through it. So it mandates maintenance on those systems and monitoring, and then this follows up again on the Clean Water Act that asks for this to be done, and that's really it. So a lot of change in the last 5 years, and it's something that you should all be aware of. Any questions?
Yeah, Don, great job as always. But maybe for the group, could you give a operational definition of best management practices, especially in the context of requirements versus nice thing to do?
That's, well, really, it's the language of shall and should, you know, and that's all in there. And we hope that they act in good fashion, but oftentimes you have to, you know, lay it out for them and specifically. And I don't know where you want me to go with this.
Well, I was hoping to, just for the educational, especially for folks who may not be familiar with those terms, like you are, since you work regulatory, you know, there's requirements and then there's BMPs.
Yeah.
Requirements you have to do.
Yeah, and then best
BMPs.
management practices are something that you should do, and that you should, but they should also be put together in a form that's required by the rule, the specific rule. So there should be language in there for you to put together your best management practices. And these were specifically for golf courses and, what was the other one? Agriculture, which agriculture, again, isn't a major source here. But golf courses is mainly just overall management of them.
I think it's a term people are going to see a lot while they're on the board. So.
Okay.
Yeah, so if it helps, right, best management practices are sort of a toolbox of ways to do things, you know, better, either to, you know, get more out of your agriculture and pollute less. But different tools are better for different crops, different applications, different sites. And so then the Florida Department of Ag and Consumer Sciences has developed, you know, specific manuals for cattle, for row crops, for, you know, for citrus that go through all those best management tools and figure out which ones apply to these agricultural practices in the state of Florida. If that helps a little.
Thanks.
Thank you, John.
Longer by the year.
Yes, yeah. That really ends all the reports, and so we'll go to the next video.
Yep, so the My Lagoon story video that Deb did is the video we have today, and Logan's gonna load that up.
I have a lifetime of memories on the Indian River Lagoon, but perhaps some of my favorite are from my childhood, when my parents would bring us over to visit our aunt and uncle in Sebastian, and he would take us out on his boat to the Spoil Islands, and we would have great picnics. I would cut my feet through the soles of my kid sneakers, walking on the oyster beds that used to be there, and just having a wonderful time afterward with the fish and shrimp and big family dinners that came out of the abundance that was in the lagoon then. I wanted to serve because the lagoon's been part of my life. When my husband and I moved here in 2013, we didn't realize the lagoon was in peril. It was a shock to see the changes in the water quality, the absence of a lot of wildlife and shellfish, and also just the algae that was growing on the bottom of the lagoon where seagrass had been. I mean, I had seen my first manatee in the wild down by those islands, so that's why I chose to get involved. I actually think there are two challenges associated with the lagoon. The first one is just the complexity of the system. You know, we're talking about miles and miles, over 70% of the lagoon is in Brevard County. And the conditions vary widely. It's a natural system. And what works in one part of the lagoon may not work in another part. It's a highly varied living system. And I think that the foresight that went into the creation of the cleanup plan is amazing in that it allows the committee and the scientists involved in the program to make adjustments as time goes along in response to what's really happening in the lagoon. The second challenge I see is really public awareness of the work that's being done and how important it is to continue to sustain that beyond this initial 10 years of the plan. So the actions I'm taking in my own life are varied. They're little things like being careful about not letting my grass clippings go in the lagoon, or the the tree leaves out of the oak tree behind my house. But I'm doing some big things too. I'm involved as a donor and as a volunteer and as a board member of Keep Brevard Beautiful, which for 40 years has helped keep Brevard looking good and does literally hundreds of cleanups every year to help keep trash and debris and pollution out of the lagoon. And it's really, really gratifying to know that that support for the lagoon continues to people who are willing, like me, to lend a hand and do tangible things that we can do to keep our waters clean. I think it's important that we protect the lagoon because it is a source of life for us here, not just because of the economy, not just because of the enjoyment that we can get out of it, but it really is the source of life for this paradise that we have here that we all want to be proud of.
Any old business? New business? We have three public comments. First one's from Craig Wallace.
Good morning, all. Craig Wallace with the Brevard Indian River Lagoon Coalition. Thanks for all the great dialogue that went on today. I thought the reports were great. So one specific thing I wanted to talk about today is a big part of what we do is educating the public on what's going on. We do straight talks and various engagements with the public, along with Brandon and everybody else is trying to get the public engaged. But one of the things we've identified as an opportunity is to try to get a spot at the zoo where the public can come by and talk about. We can talk to them and they can ask questions about what's going on there. So there already is a spot there, and for those of you that visit the zoo probably know that there is a Restore Our Shores kiosk there. So what we decided is well, one of the issues they have there is it's kind of dark and it's just not really inviting to a lot of people as they walk by, and they don't even know what it is because there's a lot of signs and you know what does that mean? So you really need people there. And they do staff it with volunteers at times, but it's not typically people there. So we decided that maybe we could do something to help. So we talked. We kind of figured that one of the things you got to do is you've got to address the children. If you've got something that can grab the kids' attention as they walk by, then maybe they'll pull the parents in and you can talk to the parents. So we've talked to several teen groups, but one of the organizations that's kind of volunteered pretty heavily here is the Aqua Science program at Cocoa Beach High School, a fairly new program. Cole Manis has been here and talked a couple times about their program. If you haven't been out there to see it, it's really amazing. They have a whole lab there. But anyway, their students, found out about this. Obviously, Cole told them about it, and volunteered. So they came out and spent an hour or so at the kiosk just to kind of get an idea of what was there and talk to some people as they came by. And they got really excited. So they put together a presentation on all the things they thought they could, might be able to do to improve the engagement with the public and that sort of thing. And so we're now in the process of trying to set up so that we have both an adult and a teen in the kiosk for at least a weekend a month. So what I would like to ask you, if you were interested, to contact me, and if you'd like to, spend some time. It wouldn't be all day. We'll do shifts there, but if you're interested in getting involved in that program, I'd appreciate it. So we're going to do our first one. Will probably be a Memorial Day weekend, and then we'll go on from there. So thank you for the time. Yeah.
Right. We started the meeting, or earlier in the meeting, about social media post, and what we do here with the committee, and what the group does, but you guys at the coalition also have a pretty regular posting that goes out to the public, and you distribute that to other organizations as well. I think the latest one was about lawn debris, doesn't go down the sewer. So do you have any idea of how big that reach is?
Yeah, the reach, and I think the maximum reach we had was probably on the seagrass post. And I think we had something like 30,000 on that. It varies from, a couple thousand to high numbers. So, yeah, and so the key thing there is we're engaging various organizations, as you mentioned. I think we've got like 20 different co-workers that basically we send a message out to them and they distribute it out to their base. So, and that's something we're continuing to grow that. So if anybody would be interested in tying into that, let me know about that also, because more the merrier on that. But we're trying to get, it's not just one person to one person, it's one person to many, and get that engaged, but get that common message out there. And the messaging we do is right along with what the county does. So basically we took the monthly calendar that Brandon put together, and we're using that as the base, and we send the messages out based on that. Been great response to that. Thanks, Chuck, for bringing that up.
Thank you. I have Michael Abdel.
Good morning, everyone. I came in today because I've been dealing with Terry for the CLAM program and the restoration and grant program, and we'd like to say thank you for that opportunity. And we would hope that you would continue that and possibly entertain expanding it. We had 12 grants before, and we would kind of like to get up into that 30 range because we're putting a lot of clams in the water, and we're doing a good job with the river, and it's a small portion of 2 million gallons, 3 million gallons a day. Doesn't seem like much, but it's more than what was going on before. And it's helped us because of some of the catastrophic losses we had from some of the hurricanes and things like that have come through. So I just want to say thanks for the past, and hopefully we can do something in the future. All right. Thank you.
What's your phone number?
What, I'm sorry?
What's your phone number?
708-305-0236. We're down in Body F, and I live in Barefoot Bay.
Excuse me? I couldn't hear the last.
I said we're down in Body F, and I said my number is a Midwestern number, but I live in Barefoot Bay.
How have you seen survival? I'm sorry.
It's been spectacular this year. I mean, literally, we just pulled bags that we planted in February, and our survival is north of 90%. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
I got this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Edward Mangano.
Hello, everyone, and I wanted to also thank you for the grant program, because I was able to take advantage of that, not once but twice, once after Ian and once after just recently, Milton? I graduated FIT in 1987 with a environmental science and aquaculture degree, and I worked at Harbor Branch the following after graduation on an economic feasibility study of growing hard clams in the Indian River Lagoon. After that project ended, I went to work for a private company which grew clams from 87 probably till about 95 or so, across from an old Sea Grape Manor in Melbourne Beach. I currently live in Melbourne Beach. I've been living in there for the last 40 years and been farming clams for 38 years of that 40 years being here. I just wanted to thank you like Mike did. I grow clams in Indian River and in Brevard County. We have come a long way, but we've seen a lot of changes in the lagoon, and we've learned a lot over those years on how to deal with different obstacles. But the clams, I know, are helping clean the lagoon, and we try to make sure that we're very environmental friendly the way we do it. And I just wanted to offer my help if it ever comes up. I think email's on the card,
And I've been doing this for 40 years, so if anybody has any questions down the road, please feel free to contact me. I was kind of active in, I wouldn't call it politics, but we got some issues through Tallahassee and was very active until my first daughter was born. And then I kind of dropped out of everything and just concentrated on work and family. And my youngest daughter is graduating Mel High next Friday and just graduated Eastern Florida yesterday. So I'll be available. So just thank you again for the grant thing, and hopefully you'll redo it.
Where do you get your seed plants from?
Okay, several places. I have some that I work with Harbor Branch on. If they have excess, I hold their seed in case they have like a disaster. So I have some of their seed, which I end up keeping a little bit of it. But I hold theirs in case they have a problem, because they use theirs for restoration. I think they work with the zoo and some other agencies for restoration. I also do restoration with the drone drop. With the seed comes from University of Florida's, I think it's marine land up in St. Augustine, and Mike Sullivan also has a hatchery there who does the restoration seed spawning. And he just gave me some seed last week that I'll grow up for the drone project. Or we'll also put some in the field for grow out in case any restoration grants come through that they want the seed that's the wild seed. And the wild seed and the farm seed is really technically the same thing, because as the BMPs state is you can only have seed that is from your area. So it's kind of redundant that they have a wild seed and a farm seed. But in any event, we also farm seed, and our seed comes from those two hatcheries, or the bulk of our commercial seed. Right now, I have to send broodstock every year to a company we work with in the Northeast. And that company spawns for us, gets approval from veterinarians, and the state agencies all approve it before it comes back down. And then so we get it at about 500 microns or half a millimeter, and then we grow it up in our upweller systems, which are a different item that's at a marina. And those actually are like, I call them giant filters, because we can have 10 million seed in an upweller when they first come in, and then by the time they get to about 4 to 6 millimeter, we're probably only having about 2 million seed in that upweller. But we have about 10 upwellers, and they're about 12 by 32, and each one has like trays. And those trays are just clams that are filtering the water that we basically get, it pumps through, the water gets pumped into the tanks and goes through the screens. So the water going out of that upweller is incredibly cleaner or stripped of algae from what has come in. And we know that because even though they don't always do it, I keep telling the guys, you got to rotate the trays, you got to rotate the trays. When they don't rotate the trays, the bottom trays are big, the top trays are small, and the reason is because all the food's getting stripped out of the water. So we bring the seed in and then we grow it up. And a lot of it ends up on our leases, but more ends up to other farmers around the state. And in fact, because one thing about the program is there's several farmers now, younger people, that are getting into it, which is nice to see, because after the 2004 hurricanes, almost every farmer just quit. They just said, forget it, we're done. And we're at the point now where it's some younger people coming in going, hey, let me try that. So they buy 50,000 seed and put it out and try it. And so this program actually would really help the new people coming in, which would help everything, I think. But thank you for your time.
What's your phone number?
It's on the card. Oh, I'll put it on the card if you want. I was advised not to say my phone number to the world. But thank you, I'll give it to you.
I don't think you can get it afterwards. It's not on there. Yeah, he's got the card. Here, let me get it for you. Yeah.
Dawn, can I just, so as part of Aaliyah's presentation, right, one of the things that we've completed is all the clam aquaculture grants, right? So that's what this request is. They want more. So the clam aquaculture grant program was carved out a few years ago from the oyster restoration money that had been established for each sublagoon. So all of the restoration money in the central lagoon basin has been contracted, has been allocated and contracted. And so the challenge is, you know, if we want to do more, if we want to continue that program, you know, here we are in year 9. I mean, it's good news. We've completed a program, but there's interest in growing the program. So, you know, how do we do that? It means either taking money away from another basin, which means they're not going to get as great the water quality benefits as originally allocated between Banana, North, and Central, or taking it away from a different project type. The stormwater projects are the ones that are typically the easiest to take from, because not all of those have entered design. Nobody spent any money on those last stormwater projects, but all of the stormwater projects in the Central Lagoon have already been allocated and are moving forward. So, you know, it's really a challenge to figure out where to come up with funding to continue the clam aquaculture grants if the committee wants to do that.
Go ahead, Laura.
So, in the fall, when we have that little tiny bit of extra money that we allocate, can they participate in that program coming up this fall?
Yes.
So you'll keep them informed?
We can do that.
Thank you.
And Virginia, these are commercial operations, correct? And this is an expansion, they would expand the commercial operation, is that what that would be used for? Mhm. Is there a point, just as a businessman, that they expand themselves based on their own revenue generation, or is it just not feasible?
So these are $6,000 grants
Okay.
to place at least 500,000 seed clams. And so they're spending about $5,000 on the seed clams, and then the other $1,000 on nets and mesh, and,
Personnel
you know,
and all that.
other equipment.
Sure. Great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I think the initial point, and maybe we need to put this on new business or something on a future meeting for discussion, but was to sort of keep them in operations or jumpstart new operations, right? Ed's point was you got a potential new generation of people interested, and the water quality is finally such that, you know, there's reason for them to be interested, but now the grant program is used up.
It would also be good to have presentations on where we're getting success with clams too. Some of that data is available, and so we need to understand where we're getting success and to where to go with that.
And one final one on that too, I mean, obviously $6,000 in the grand scheme of 500-something million is pretty tiny. What happens with the interest we're earning on this? Is that available, or has that already been allocated too?
So all of the principal is allocated to projects, and the interest is funding the O&M.
The employees, right, and the
yes.
ongoing operations.
Yeah, all
Got
that-
it, remember
the
that now,
admin side.
thank you.
Well, we're to the point where we open it up to the committee and any comments from the committee. Come on, guys. You got a lot of information today.
Huge. I'm having a little trouble seeing
Oh, seeing the presentations?
on the letters. You know, the words,
Size.
the size.
That's right.
Am I the only one?
No, but you should get closer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's-
You
that
might
would-
want to switch seats, just so you
Good
can see
idea.
better.
Oh, no, I just got the seating chart.
Do we need a motion for that?
We can't do that. Unfortunately, I just sat down where my nameplate was.
No, we can certainly do that, set you up.
No, it's not a big complaint. It's
No,
just
no,
it's
but
helpful.
we want you to be able to see the presentations for sure. Yeah, no, there'd be no problem with that.
Don, I think Todd really deserves some commendation here. His report was unbelievable to me. Just powerful.
Yeah.
So he left before I could run over there and thank him, but we really
well,
owe him a lot of
wealth of
things. That's a
information.
lot of research and a tremendous presentation.
Yeah.
And they're all good, but that was
We miss,
really unbelievable.
we miss Todd's,
Yes.
just his balance and his approach on finance and how we should approach finance. But that's what I hope you all learned from that, is the balance that we have to always look at. Anything else?
Good session.
Okay, well, if that's it, we're early. We're out of here. Thanks a
Meeting
lot.
adjourned. Thank you.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.